I stared through the car window as we turned onto a quiet street I had never seen before. "Dad, where are we going?" I asked, clutching one of the trash bags resting against my knees. He didn't look at me. "You'll find out in a minute." My mother kept her eyes fixed on the windshield. She hadn't spoken in nearly 20 minutes. The car stopped in front of a modest white house with a swing on the porch. Dad got out, opened the trunk, and pulled out the only things I owned now: 2 black trash bags stuffed with my clothes, school notebooks, and a faded teddy bear. I frowned. "Why are my things in trash bags?" He sighed impatiently. "Because we're in a hurry." A woman opened the front door before we even reached it. "You must be Diana," she said softly. I looked at my parents, confused. Dad answered for me. "We can't afford another mouse to feed anymore." For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed nervously. "Okay, so when are you picking me back up?" Neither of them answered. The woman on the porch stopped smiling. My mother finally whispered, "Take care of yourself." She didn't hug me. Dad handed the woman a folder, turned around and walked back toward the car without another word. "Dad," I shouted. He never looked back. The engine started. The car pulled away. And I stood there holding 2 trash bags while my family disappeared around the corner. I was 12 years old. The woman gently rested a hand on my shoulder. "Come inside, sweetheart." I kept staring down the road. "They forgot to say when they're coming back." She hesitated before answering. "They probably won't be coming back today." I didn't understand what she meant. In my mind, this had to be temporary. Maybe a week, maybe a month if money was really that tight. Parents didn't just leave their children forever because bills got expensive. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The foster home was clean and welcoming, but none of that mattered. Every unfamiliar sound reminded me that I wasn't home anymore. The first few days passed in a blur of paperwork, introductions, and awkward conversations. One afternoon I sat quietly in the hallway while 2 adults spoke in the kitchen, unaware I could hear them. "I don't know," one of them said. "They claimed financial hardship, but did you see the car they drove here?" "I noticed," the other replied. "Usually families in that situation don't look quite so comfortable." Their voices dropped before I could hear more. That conversation stayed with me. Maybe they were wronged. Maybe there was something I didn't understand. I held on to that hope until about a month later. One evening, another foster child was scrolling through social media on a tablet. "Hey," he said casually, "isn't that your brother?" I leaned closer. There he was. My younger brother stood in our driveway wearing a huge grin, one hand gripping the handlebars of a brand new dirt bike, wrapped with a giant red bow. The caption read, "Best birthday ever, thanks Mom and Dad." I couldn't stop staring at the picture. The bike looked expensive. Far more expensive than school clothes. Far more expensive than groceries. Far more expensive than keeping one 12-year-old girl at home. I slowly lowered the tablet. If my parents really couldn't afford me, then how could they afford that? For the first time, I stopped asking when they were coming back. Instead, one terrifying question took its place. Why was I the only child they chose to give away? Diana counted the days at first. 7, 14, 30. Every morning she expected someone at the front door. Every afternoon she checked the mailbox. Every evening she listened whenever a car slowed outside the house. "They'll come," she whispered to herself before falling asleep. Weeks became months. No one came. Her foster mother, Mrs. Reynolds, noticed the pattern almost immediately. One afternoon she found Diana carefully folding a letter. "Writing to your parents." Diana nodded. "I just want them to know I'm doing okay." Mrs. Reynolds smiled gently. "Would you like me to mail it?" "Please." Diana wrote another one a few weeks later. Then another. She described school, the friends she was beginning to make, and how she had joined the library club because it didn't cost any money. She never complained. She never asked why they had left her. Every letter ended the same way. "I love you, I hope we can be together again soon." None of them received a reply. Months later, Mrs. Reynolds sat beside Diana at the kitchen table. "There are some things I think you should know." Diana looked up hopefully. "Did they write back?" Mrs. Reynolds slowly shook her head. "No birthday cards have arrived." Diana's smile disappeared. "No phone calls." She looked down at the table. "No requests for visits." Silence settled between them. "There has to be a mistake," Diana said quietly. "Maybe they don't know where I am." Mrs. Reynolds reached across the table. "They knows." Diana pulled her hand away. "They're probably just trying to save enough money." It was the same explanation she repeated whenever anyone questioned her parents. Even after seeing the dirt bike. Even after hearing whispers that their story didn't make sense. Believing they still cared hurt less than believing they had chosen to leave her. A year later, during a supervised records review required for her case, Diana sat beside a social worker flipping through documents. Most of the pages looked ordinary. Income statements, placement forms, agency notes. One phrase appeared again and again. Financial hardship. But something caught her attention. The dates didn't line up. One report referred to ongoing financial instability, while another document from nearly the same period listed regular employment with no interruption. She frowned. "Why are these different?" The social worker glanced over the paperwork. "I'm not sure, these files can be complicated." The answer didn't satisfy her. She wasn't accusing anyone of lying. Not yet. But for the first time, she wondered if someone had told a story that wasn't entirely true. Years passed. Diana aged out of foster care, carrying everything she owned in the same 2 trash bags she had arrived with, though they had long since been replaced. She worked mornings at a grocery store, evenings at a diner. She studied between shifts. Scholarships helped her finish college, 1 semester at a time. Piece by piece, she built a life without waiting for anyone to rescue her. People occasionally asked whether she had ever tried to find her parents. She always gave the same answer. "No." "Don't you want to know why?" She forced a small smile. "I'm afraid I already do." Digging deeper felt dangerous. As long as she avoided the truth. There was still a tiny part of her that believed there had been some reason, some explanation that would make everything hurt a little less. Then one afternoon her phone rang. "Hello." "Hi Diana, my name is Karen. I'm a producer with Channel 8 Investigates." Diana frowned. "I think you have the wrong number." "I don't." Karen paused. "We're investigating several foster care placements from 15 years ago. Your case came up during our research." Diana's heart began to race. "I'm not interested." "I understand," Karen replied calmly, "but before you decide." There was another brief silence. "We found something in your file." Diana tightened her grip on the phone. "What kind of something?" Karen answered with quiet certainty. "There's something in your file you deserve to see." The first time Diana walked into the television station, she almost turned around. Producers hurried through the halls carrying cameras and folders. Phones rang non-stop. Monitors displayed news broadcasts from around the country. Karen met her in the lobby. "I'm glad you came." "I'm still not sure I should be here," Diana admitted. Karen nodded. "That's your decision, but we only contacted you after finding records that raised serious questions." She led Diana into a conference room where a stack of documents waited on the table. "We've spent months interviewing former caseworkers, reviewing financial records, and comparing agency files." An investigator slid a folder toward Diana. Your parents claimed they couldn't afford to raise you. She opened it slowly. Inside were copies of official statements describing severe financial hardship. Then another investigator placed a second folder beside the first. Now compare those dates. Diana looked from one page to another. Credit records, property permits, vehicle purchases, receipts, vacation bookings. The dates overlapped. She looked up. They were buying all this at the same time. The investigator gave a quiet nod. As far as we can verify, yes. Diana didn't speak. For years she had imagined countless explanations. None of them matched what she was seeing. The investigation continued over the following weeks. Camera crews interviewed neighbors who had lived on Diana's old street. I remember when they remodeled the kitchen, one neighbor recalled. Didn't they also go to Florida that summer? Another asked. Oh, absolutely. Someone else laughed bitterly. And their son got that fancy dirt bike. Every kid in the neighborhood wanted one. Each interview chipped away at the story Diana had been told when she was 12. If the family had been struggling so badly, why had nobody around them noticed? The producers also tracked down extended relatives. One aunt looked genuinely confused during her interview. They told us Diana had serious behavioral issues. Another relative interrupted. That's not what we heard. What were you told? That foster care was temporary until they got back on their feet. A third family member shook his head. They told us it was for everyone's safety. Karen paused the recording. Notice anything? Diana stared at the screen. They told every person a different story. No consistent explanation, Karen agreed. That's what caught our attention. The investigation gained momentum. Former classmates remembered Diana suddenly disappearing without warning. Teachers described her as quiet, respectful, and academically strong. None of it matched the image her parents had quietly spread among certain relatives. Still, the investigators couldn't make one crucial claim. Not yet. We know the stories don't line up, one researcher explained. We know the spending doesn't match the hardship. But proving intentional deception requires one more piece of evidence. What piece? Diana asked. The investigator exchanged a glance with Karen. We're still looking. A month later, Karen called again. We're ready. For what? The story. Diana arrived at the studio before sunrise. A makeup artist adjusted the lights, while another producer clipped a microphone onto her jacket. You can still walk away, Karen reminded her. No one will pressure you. Diana looked through the studio window at the empty news desk. For 15 years I thought maybe I misunderstood what happened. She took a slow breath. If telling my story helps someone else find answers. She nodded. I'm staying. That evening, promotional ads for the investigation aired across the city. Viewers were told the special report would expose questions surrounding foster care placements and feature one woman searching for the truth behind her childhood abandonment. Across town, Diana's father finished work and sat down for dinner as he had thousands of evenings before. He picked up his fork without paying much attention to the television. The local news faded into the special report. The anchor looked directly into the camera. Tonight, we investigate the story of a girl who was told her parents couldn't afford to keep her. Old photographs appeared on the screen. Then the reporter spoke a name that hadn't been heard in that house for 15 years. Diana. Her father froze. The color drained from his face as he stared at the television. His fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto the plate. The fork hit the plate with a sharp clang. Diana's father didn't move. On the television, a photograph filled the screen, a 12-year-old girl standing on the porch of a foster home, holding 2 black trash bags. His wife looked up from across the table. What is it? He didn't answer. The reporter continued. 15 years ago, Diana was placed into foster care after her parents reported they could no longer afford to raise her. His breathing grew shallow. "Turn it off," he muttered. His wife reached for the remote, but before she could press a button, the program cut to Diana's interview. She sat calmly in a studio chair. "I spent years believing my parents had no choice," she said. "I wasn't angry. I thought they were doing what they had to do." Her father leaned forward. "Enough." His wife lowered the remote. "They're just telling her story." "No," he snapped, "they're twisting it." Back at the station, the investigation moved carefully through the timeline. The reporter displayed copies of the original placement documents without making accusations. Agency records show the decision relied heavily on financial declarations submitted by Diana's parents. A former caseworker appeared on screen. "We had no reason to believe the information was inaccurate. We depended on families to provide truthful financial disclosures." Another retired supervisor echoed the same point. "If we'd known the declarations were incomplete, the review process would have looked very different." Diana watched from a private viewing room, alongside Karen and several members of the production team. No one celebrated. No one interrupted. They simply let the evidence speak. Then another interview began. A retired records employee sat in front of shelves filled with archived files. "Several months ago," he explained, "we were transferring old records into digital storage when we found a document that had been misfiled years earlier." Karen glanced toward Diana. "This is the document I mentioned." The camera showed only the edge of a sealed folder. "Not its contents." "Not yet." The reporter continued. Before broadcasting tonight's report, investigators verified the document's authenticity through multiple independent sources. At home, Diana's father gripped the arm of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He knew exactly which document they were talking about. He had spent years assuming no one would ever find it. His wife looked at him. "Why are you acting like this?" He swallowed. "They shouldn't have that file." Before she could ask another question, her phone vibrated. Her sister's name flashed across the screen. She answered. "Hello." Her sister didn't waste time. "Are you watching Channel 8? "Oh yes." "What are they saying about Diana?" "I don't know yet." Another call appeared on the father's phone. He ignored it. Then another. And another. Within minutes, text messages began arriving from old neighbors, distant relatives, former co-workers, and people he hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this true? We are watching right now. Call me." His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Meanwhile, online discussion exploded. Viewers posted screenshots of public records shown during the broadcast. Others compared timelines from interviews with property permits and purchase dates mentioned in the report. Questions spread faster than answers. Back in the studio, Diana remained composed. The reporter asked, "After everything you've learned, what do you want from your parents?" She paused before answering. "I don't want revenge." The room fell silent. "I just want the truth to stop hiding." Karen looked at the control room through the glass. Everything now depended on one final piece of evidence. The reporter turned toward the camera. "When we return, we'll reveal the recovered document that led investigators to reopen Diana's case after 15 years. At that exact moment, Diana's father closed his eyes. He whispered only 4 words. "They found the review." The screen instantly faded to black. A commercial break began. The commercial break ended, and the broadcast returned without dramatic music or sensational headlines. The reporter stood beside a table, holding a single file. "For 15 years, one document remained buried in archived records," she said. "After verifying its authenticity through multiple independent sources, investigators can now explain why this case was reopened." The file was opened. Inside was a financial review completed just weeks before Diana entered foster care. The reporter continued. The review concluded that Diana's family met the financial requirements to continue caring for both children. The recommendation was clear. There was no financial basis requiring the removal of one child from the home. Diana sat perfectly still. She heard every word, but for a moment it felt as though the room had gone silent. The report continued. Investigators found that after this review, Diana's father submitted additional statements portraying the family's financial situation as significantly worse than the official assessment. Those statements omitted savings and income that were later confirmed through financial records. The screen displayed a timeline. Employment records, bank information, property documents. Each piece fit together. The story her parents had told agencies, relatives, and even Diana herself fell apart one document at a time. The reporter concluded, the evidence indicates Diana's placement resulted from deliberate deception rather than genuine financial necessity. In the viewing room, no one spoke. Karen slowly reached over and squeezed Diana's hand. Diana's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the television. For 15 years she had wondered if she had somehow been too expensive, too difficult, or simply not worth keeping. Now strangers, people with no reason to protect or condemn anyone, had confirmed the truth. She had never been abandoned because she lacked value. She had been lied about. Across town, her father remained frozen in front of the television. His carefully rehearsed explanations no longer mattered. The evidence spoke for itself. His wife covered her mouth as the realization settled in. "You told me," she whispered. He couldn't answer. There was nothing left to say. His phone rang again. Then again. He placed it face down on the table. The calls kept coming. Before the program ended, the reporter revealed that Diana's younger brother had declined an interview, but had issued a brief statement after reviewing the investigation. It read, "I grew up believing my sister left because there was no other choice. I never knew the truth. I'm sorry she went through this." Diana closed her eyes. For the first time since she was 12 years old, someone from her family had acknowledged what had happened. Not with excuses. Not with another story. With the truth. Within days, authorities announced they would review portions of Diana's placement to determine whether false financial declarations had improperly influenced the agency's decision. Administrative investigators requested records connected to the original case. Civil legal proceedings followed regarding the submitted financial statements. The outcome could not erase Diana's childhood, but it ensured the deception would no longer remain buried. The family's reputation unraveled almost overnight. Neighbors who had defended Diana's parents for years learned they had each been given different explanations. Friends quietly distanced themselves. Former co-workers stopped returning calls. The respect Diana's father had spent years protecting disappeared far more quickly than it had been earned. Diana's life moved in the opposite direction. Instead of being known as the forgotten girl left at a foster home with 2 trash bags, she became recognized for helping shine a light on how greater transparency could protect vulnerable children from similar failures. Organizations invited her to speak about the importance of accountability and accurate reporting in child welfare cases. She accepted not to relive the past, but to make sure someone else's future might be different. A week after the broadcast, Diana drove back to the foster home where everything had changed 15 years earlier. Mrs. Reynolds, now older but still smiling the same gentle smile, opened the door. "I hoped you'd visit." Diana hugged her tightly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being the one person who didn't make me feel like I was disposable." Mrs. Reynolds smiled through tears. "You never were." Before leaving, Diana stood on the porch where she had once watched her parents drive away. The fear that had lived inside her for so many years was finally gone. She no longer needed an apology to understand her own worth. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove toward the life she had built for herself. The night my father heard my name on the news wasn't the day he lost a daughter, it was the day the truth finally caught up with him.